Welcome back, everyone. We have the next guest, and it's a very special guest, very close to my heart. The man, the myth, the legend himself. Hey! How are you doing?
Nobody knows who that is anymore. He hasn't
Oh,
been
yeah.
in public for such a long time. Nobody remembers him.
Come on, it's not like this. It's not that much.
Hi, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing very fine, thank you. I've been working on many different things, and I want to showcase a bit the latest things I've been working on, and that's might interesting a few of the people watching, I think.
All
So
right. Now, quickly before you leave, show us the hex mug. Just
yeah,
because.
I have a X mug here.
Yeah,
That was
can you hold it up a little higher?
it has a little story. It has like this. You can
Yes.
see because I don't
Yes,
have
now
the
we can see it.
screen.
Yes.
So it was offered to me by a Secret Santa at Games. And at the back, I don't know if it's true, but there's written world best X programmer. So I mean,
I think by now that's debatable, but.
to be challenged.
All right, then let's go ahead with your talk. There you go.
All
Okay.
right.
Welcome everyone. I'm sorry I can't see you because it's always weird to make these online talks when you can see the people in front of you. But I will try my best to entertain you during this half an hour. So today I will present you the work I've been doing in the past years on a project called IDE. As you know, maybe I have made a 3D engine, a 2D and 3D engine called Heaps.io, which is being used for my company to make games such as Northgard, Evoland, Evoland 2, and also Dead Cells, so from other companies. And so it's open source, of course. It's entirely written in Axe. And so this is just a game engine, so it's just like code that you can use to write your own game. But often what is important for some people is to be able to have some high-level software to manipulate the data, the mesh, especially in 3D, to create tools for creating the games. So this is the purpose of IDE, which stands for Heaps IDE, which is a middleware that allows you to create your own editors to produce data for your game, produce, modify, edit, tune. So it's a way to create your games. In IDE, it's based on so it's running the Heaps.io engine inside NWJS, which is a bit like Electron. It's similar to Electron. So it's a like desktop application that runs the engine directly into a web view, which allows us to create all the UI using HTML5 and CSS, which is a lot faster to create and to style than doing everything using native components. And so I will just start IDE. So this is IDE. Right now we have opened a project. This is Darksborg, which is one of the games we've been releasing recently at Motion Twin, at Shiro Games, sorry. And so we have you have all your files, which are basically all your runtime data from the game, and you can, for instance, open a model using FBX format. So it takes a bit of time to load. Okay, first, also, I would like to apologize in case I had a crash, because I don't know why on this particular laptop I'm using, there seems to be some problem with the drivers, which means we might experience some crash when displaying 3D content. We don't have this crash when using our development computers, so you can trust me on that. So here you can see we open a FBX model in 3D. We have all the information about the materials here. You can show the different texture, and we can modify also the rendering. For instance, showing matcap mode, which just shows the lighting, of the model and the ways it reacts to the light. So we have different ways, or the environment, the way it's like the normals or like the different details. So we have all these tools for displaying 3D models, and you can also play the animation. For instance, I can play healing, or hit, or the idol is gonna be nice. Yeah, so she's have his weapon in hands, and she's making sure that everything is all right. So we have this this kind of 3D model viewer, which allows our graphics people to be able to run the model directly into the engine, see how it looks, check for bugs, and check for naming's correctness, and do a bit of settings of setup for the models. And then we have also more advanced. This is just a viewer, but we can also create editors for different things. One editor, for instance, is FX editor, when you can create different special effects using timelines. So just loading you one. So it shows very small here, but it's meant to run with all the to be able to edit all the timelines. So it's a small editor here. So here you can see the effects playing, and you can rewind and pause and etc. And here you can click on different parts and see all the curves for the different parameters that we use to create the FX. So you can edit a part of the FX, only work on this part, for instance, on the beam, or you can work on different parts. You can have different color change, animations, emit rates on the different particles, etc. So it's quite a complex editor here to create special effects in 3D. And it exists also in 2D for UI effects, for instance, particles or transitions or different things. So this is FX. This is an open source tool. This is the FX editor we built using IDE. And I will show later how you can build your own editors, which is and extends the existing editors, which is also very interesting. And we have different editors. Like, for instance, we have also editors for creating wall levels in 3D. For instance, if I open this one, this is the time it might crash in case there's this driver problem, in case we might reload. And this computer is a bit slow. So here is loading all the assets of the level into the 3D view here. And we have a lot of filters for this. Yeah, it loads. This is quite a big level, so it takes a bit of time on this computer also. Again, this is a laptop I'm using for streaming, which is not the best development computer you can have. So here you can see a level that was created for the game, with you can see like spawn points for monsters and a lot of objects that were added around. And so you have all the time, like the different objects here, all the checkpoints, the elements for the pass, the elements for gameplay also. So you get both visuals, for instance, these elements, and I can move it around. This is actually I picked one box here, but I can take this one thing and move it around and just rotate and change the way it's placed on the level and the scale and all the properties. So it's a really quite interactive editor. So it doesn't, unlike some engine such as Unity or Unreal, it doesn't actually run the game inside so you cannot start and play the game directly in IDE. But what we do usually is that we have the game running with the full engine and the full controls, and then we have a watch callback on the level data. If it gets modified, we get reload into the game, and then the game you can actually edit your level on a separate screen, and then when you save, it reloads into the game, and you can play the game with a change you made. So this allows us to have really two dedicated views: one view for editing the level and set up the gameplay, and one view for playing, which I think is nice to have like very different logic for both. And so that's it for the different editors. Well, I will show you more about prefabs later. These are the main editors. I will show some. Is there some questions maybe up to there? I will just go on Twitch to check for questions. I need to cut the sound. Yeah. I think it's mute. Yeah. Is this getting like a lot of recursive rendering? So just waiting for question of this first part on the chat. If there is none, I will just move on to the next part because I don't want to get less. Okay, I think everyone is fine. Okay, so I'm moving on with the next part, which is showing a bit of code. So in IDE, you have this is source code of IDE. You can get it from github.com heaps.io IDE. I will post later the URL. And in the IDE directory, you have something called UI view. So this is the basic view, the one that gives you this kind of view in IDE on the. For instance, this is a view, and so if you edit, if you can edit a JSON file, I think you can edit a JSON file, and this is a view, and you have a panel system that allows you to put your views the way you want, which no one uses, but it's still there. And then you have you can create your own view by extending this IDE view. So for instance, you can see a view for a sound, for instance. So it extends the file view, and on display, it will get the path of the audio sound and will display an HTML audio tag for playing the sound. And the nice point is that it will register some extension like Wave, MP3, and OGG with different icons. So it means that the sounds here will display here with different icons, and when you open, you can see the sound playing here. Okay, so this is just a view for the sound. It's quite simple, and to write a new view for your specific like editor, and but you can do much more than this, because of course when you want to create something such as introduce a new gameplay type in your gameplay object in your game, you don't want to write a full renderer or a full 3D editor. So what you can do is you can create prefabs. So here I'm creating a prefab, and the prefab is a scene. It can contain both 2D and 3D objects. So for instance, here I create a 2D bitmap, and I can scale it, I can rotate. So this is a 2D element here, and it's shown in my scene here, and I have all the properties for it. So I can change the color, and I can change. Here is pink because it doesn't have any texture, but I can switch the texture. I can change the alpha mode, and I can change the pivot, and I can do a lot of different things. So, and then you have you can also do 3D. For instance, the 3D box, and this is a 3D element that is I can use I can rotate, I can move like the way I show you with the models, and I can import like for instance other like for instance a board rudder. I don't know what it is. I just drop here, and I can import 3D models into the prefab here to have my whole scene that I can set up here. And so these are prefabs. This is the prefabs, this is the prefabs, this is the prefabs. And the prefab are meant to be extended. So you can actually define your own prefabs with the way they can their own properties, and make sure they get saved into your prefab scene. And this is done by extending the prefab class. So in IDE, you have two main packages. You have the IDE, which is the editor itself, and HRT are all the resource for the runtimes, which means that they get compiled both by IDE, the editor, and by your game, so they are part of the game runtime. And in the prefab directory, you can see you have a lot of things, and this is a prefab class, which is actually documented, so which shows all the properties and all the parts you can extend to make your prefab. So it's pretty abstract. You can see most of the code is empty methods. What happens when you edit, when you select it. It creates its own interactive, which is the way you will be able to click on it. So you can actually do a lot of things, or it loads, or it saves, or it can be reloaded, etc. So, and then, for instance, I will show you the box prefab that we edit recently, like before. It's actually here. So the box extends Object 3D, which is a base prefab for 3D objects. And then you have this make instance override, which tells the way we can create an instance of this prefab. So here we create a mesh with a cube. And if we are in editor, so editor is enabled when you are in IDE, but it could be enabled if you are in other custom editor. It will change the behavior of the display. So here it will have a wire like a wire box around the box, so it's displayed differently. And so we have these editor parts that allows you to have your own things. So, for instance, the lights have this whole create a light and have this whole part about editor here when you create this HTML to create these properties. And this allows you to bind your data to your editor, and it handles all the undo and redo, which is always nice. So basically, this is the way you create prefab, and thanks to that, the prefabs they will get into your IDE. And because it's nice to be able to have your game-specific prefab, we have this plugin system where you can compile some of your prefabs into a plugin that will get loaded at runtime by IDE, depending on the game you're working on, and that will add prefab to the available prefabs for this specific game. So this allows you to have to recompile IDE entirely with your prefabs for your game. So one other thing I wanted to show you in IDE are the ability to bind is a CastleDB integration. So you have your scene here in 3D with different objects, and we have also a database. It's here in database view. In database view, you can see your CDB data. For those not familiar with CDB, CastleDB, it is a structured database. So you have different sheets here. Each sheet has its own column. So it's a bit like an Excel, but strictly typed in the sense that you can you define your own column. So for instance, I can add a column here, say it's the name of the object, and it's a text that is supposed to be localizable, so it will be able to be translated into the engine, or it's maybe something else, is some set of flags that are flags. It can be A, B, or C. Okay, and here I have my flags, and it generates automatically the interface to set its flags for these objects. And if I edit later and I rename B to B, it's actually not B, it's something, and I modify, it will change all the data accordingly. So it's very nice to be able to have this strictly typed data editor for your games, for your gameplay data, and I can delete, of course, the sheets, the columns. And you can have quite complex structured data. Here, for instance, we have things with lists, so you can have this, it have a special type, and then you have a list of different values. And here you have properties, you can add additional properties here. So there's a lot of things you can do with CastleDB. And the nice point about having CastleDB in IDE is that you can reuse these CastleDB data structures for your assets. For instance, here we can select saying this particular object is an ambient sound. So it means it's a sound that I want it to emit sound. So this not really, it doesn't do anything else than binding some data. So it's telling basically this is an instance of sound, and I can customize the different sounds. So here, for instance, it will look into it's a reference to ambient sound. So I have all my list of ambient sounds here. Let me check. Ambient sound here. I have this ambient sounds, and they are bound to some sounds, actual sound files, which I can change this way by looking in. It's a file pointer, and here I can actually choose which ambient sound I want to use. Water flowing, for instance. And so this doesn't do anything in the game engine by default. It's up to your game to define the way it wants to handle this data and use this data for performing game-specific things. So, for instance, in some environments we have, I think, no, it's not, it's the levels. We have this level, for instance, in part of dashboard. When we have the ambient sound and different gameplay data, okay, I can see, yeah, I can click here, this one. And here, for instance, this is a small level part we use to generate the levels together. So this is a dead end, so there's not much to see here. But here I have this crate, and it's a container chest. And I can define, for instance, if it's low, medium, or high loot. And here I have this like these polygons, which gives a range for ambient sounds, and I can define different ambient sounds for crows, or because there's a crow here, and I can actually, it could be defined directly on the crow, but here we can define the diameter. So here you can actually define your whole gameplay data the way you want and read it in your game and handle it the way you want. So I think it's quite interesting to be able to have some really data-oriented approach where you set up all your scene in terms of 3D objects, in terms of data, gameplay data, in a like really 3D typed manner, because thanks to Cannasse LDB, you are able to really make sure that if you rename something, it gets renamed everywhere. So it's really important to make sure that your data is always up to date and there's no thing that breaks every time someone changes something. And I think that's almost it for now. I mean, I introduced the main principle of IDE, the way you can create your own views, the way you can extend the views with additional prefab, the way also, of course, there is a lot to say about a lot of different things you can do. But the main prefab, for instance, are Object 2D and Object 3D. These are the two prefabs that allows you to create 2D and 3D objects. But you can have some prefabs that are just plain prefabs. For instance, the noise is a prefab that allows you to create permanent noise quite easily. I just reload my prefab scene, and I can do a 2D. No, it's not 2D. It's a other noise generator here. And you can see different modes, and it generates pollen noise, which can be consumed then by other prefabs and for doing different things. So yeah, I mean, I think that's it. That's the way to show. It was a way to show for me to show you the kind of tool you can build in Axe. So everything is open source. You can find it on Heaps.io IDE. Heaps.io is the engine, and IDE is the editor itself that can extend the engine for creating these editors. Thank is that animation timeline shown in the FX editor a reusable element? Can I use it in other custom editor? Yeah, we have different. Of course, we create components for as much as possible for different views, and the idea is that depending on the you can reuse the components themselves to have them as a component ready UI components in different.
Could you turn on your camera again? You turned off
Oh, my
somehow.
camera is off. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can turn on the camera. I can go back to the camera. Yeah, right.
He ran away.
Yay. Oh, so you mean I got yay like this?
There you are. Welcome
Yeah.
back.
Hey, I'm back. Sorry. So another question, how is the progress on CDB integration into IDE? The progress of CDB is complete, so it means that right now at Chiro, we are only using IDE CDB. I no longer maintain the standalone CastleDB editor because it was original written as a few classes that gets really big with the time. So right now, if you want to do CastleDB, you can still use the old editor, the one on castledb.org, because it's working, but there is a much more features and in IDE directly, and it's not a big difference because you can just do, you can actually open IDE, do a database view. This gives you view, and if you close IDE and reopen IDE, it will keep your view the way it was before. So it's basically CastleDB, and you can even do, I think, full screen. So, and well, that's the different things. So, what else? Documentation. Yes, there's a bit of documentation. I will ask if I essentially decrease. Yeah, I deprecate CDB. I did. Yeah, that's CDB. I'm no longer working on the original CDB, but I'm still sharing the code, which means hide, compile the CDB, use the CDB library. So they share the code. It's only the editor that is being entirely recreated in hide. But there is not a fork of the CastleDB client library, the one you use with your link. You link you to your Xcode. Any plan on supplying binary resist of IDE? Yeah, I'm looking for someone that can actually perform make a PR for this. I will be glad to have someone that can do automatic builds for IDE. That's for sure. One thing is a bit tricky is that sometimes we fix bugs in Heaps, and so we might need to recompile if either Heaps or IDE change. That's because both are one is using the other. Any plans for basic 2D drawing tools at Adobe Flash? Well, we have as part of Heaps, you can do already basic 2D drawing. So, I mean, if you want really to draw vectors in 2D and be able to draw your things, we don't have this yet because we don't need it for our games so far. If at some point we will need it, we will of course add this unless someone does it before us. So basically it's just, yeah, we are not doing IDE as a Unity or Unreal, trying to make all the features that people might need. We make the features we need, but we try to do them well so that other games and other people can use them. But of course, there is not all the features you might expect from a 3D editor, but it's easily extendable. Compiling to a binary still used? Basically you just compile to JavaScript and then you use NWJS runtime to load it. So it's not, there is no compile to binary ready here. Are prefabs kind of configurable factories for normal H3 class, or does HRT bring more actual runtimes to Heaps? No, yeah, it's factories for Heaps instance, because you are actually creating like scene objects for 2D and 3D scenes in Heaps, but you can also create more like different things, such as, for instance, rendering effects post-process. I haven't shown this, but you have a lot of post-process effects for PBR output. So it's more complex, and you can also create prefabs that are pure data for your game that have a display, but that is not actually displayed in your game. For instance, it can be terrain editor, 3D 8-map viewers, or these kind of things. What will you do differently knowing what you know now? That's a live question. I'm not sure. I will think about it and report to you.
Nothing.
I'm happy with my life now, so I think I will do macro in Axe much earlier. I will have that from the start. Are plugins in XGS? Yeah, I run in XGS, and so the plugins get compiled to GS as well. And I'd mean to be customized for each product with custom prefab class, editors, etc. Or we also have binaries that you can add stuff on top. Well, yeah, the idea is that we have what we do at Shiro is that we have our own IDE distribution, which gives you the basic editor, so with all the prefabs that are already as part of the IDE project. And then we have a plugin compiled for each game that contains the additional prefabs and views that the game is using. So it's just a plugin that we compile and that we get loaded at runtime. So you can, but if you want to do your own IDE with your plugin already compiled into, it's just a question of what you compile with IDE when you make your own IDE binary or IDE JavaScript actually. How much of IDE depends on Heaps? Could it be separated into generic extensible editor? I think right now, for instance, it only depends on Heaps when you want to create something called a scene editor, which is actually a 3D scene editor. So then this scene editor creates Heaps objects. I think for the prefab itself, for instance, the prefab structure doesn't depend much on Heaps. I think it's a tree of prefabs, so it's not linked to actually some specific objects system. I think the only part are the main and the make interactive, which requires return something linked to Heaps for interactive editor, and everything else is in prefab is not tied to Heaps at all, from what I can see. Yeah, actually, it's just only the interactive part is actually specific to Heaps in the prefab. But of course, the 3D scene and all the rendering is Heaps is based on Heaps. But I think someone might be able to do something with not Heaps if with enough time and willingness. I think that the prefab itself. And actually, the Heaps interactive is an interface, so I think you should be able to implement your own, and there is no problem with that. Any other questions?
I think that's it for now.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, before we let you go, since we haven't seen you in such a long time,
yeah,
let's take a selfie together. You just have to look nice and really lean over here.
Oh my
God. I
God.
can see myself. Okay, maybe I should shoot my screen here. Okay, I know I can see myself because I was looking at the question.
That looks good. Smile.
Oh, weird.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. See you.
Seeing you, even through the pipes of the internet.
All right. That was that.
that was that.
Now, I want to take a minute to talk about the internationality of this event, because we are here in Germany.
Yeah.
We started today connecting to Alex in Russia,
Yeah.
then went all the way to Australia, and then to the Netherlands. Now we're in France, and now we're going to cross the pond, right?
Yeah, actually, I had obviously mentally prepared for an in-person event, so it really did not occur to me until I was making the schedule about a week ago that I would have to contend with different time zones.
Yes.
It's like these little things that you don't really think of when you transfer something into a different format, where obviously before, yes, we were all international. Yes, we came from all over the world, but in the end, we were all in the same place. We were all sort of on the same time zone, kind of. And so I never had to worry about this. But this time actually is one of the reasons why we started in the afternoon is actually that two of our speakers are on West Coast time, which is 9 hours after us. So they are just now getting up, or rather, I mean, they're up now, but I did not want to have anyone speak at like 5 a.m. or something like that. So, and it's also like quite a challenge for team meetings when we do want to do the Hex Evolution meeting or want to get everyone to talk about something or just hang out together, right? There is like one time of day, it's like 5 p.m. or something, Central European Standard, that sort of works for everyone. But it's already very late for Hugh and for Andy and Kevin. And it's very early for Justin, for example, in Seattle. So that's been a major challenge, not just for this event, but also for working together as a whole.
Right.
Right.
So, speaking of Justin in Seattle, he's up next. We're going to take another break, and we'll see you in 5 minutes.